A debt instrument whose entire face value is paid in one lump sum on the maturity date is most likely called A, a bullet bond, B, a fully amortized bond, or C, partially amortized bond. So fully and partially amortized, these are going to be paying principal over the life of the loan. So for fully amortized in America, this is something like a mortgage where every single payment you're paying down principal and you're paying some interest. And then over the life of the loan, you're paying down more and more principal over time. And then your last payment is not any larger than any of the other payments. A partially amortized bond is kind of similar, but you're going to have a larger payment at the end on the maturity date, but it's not going to be one lump sum of the principal, which is going to be described as a bullet bond, where it's exactly this. You're basically just paying interest over the life of the loan under the scenario, and then at maturity, you have to pay back the principal. Answer A. Regarding fixed income, which of these statements is least likely a negative covenant? So least likely, meaning two of these will be negative and one will not. And remember, negative is normally something that is restricted as a part of the debt obligation. So you can't do this or you can't do that because that would put the borrower, or not the borrower, the lender at risk of potential default for some other reason. So we've got A, negative pledges. Since it's right there in the name, this is going to be a type of negative covenant, so we can rule it out. B, insure and maintain assets. This sounds like more of a positive covenant rather than it being something they can't do. It's something that they must do to do this. So they must have insurance and they must maintain their assets. So these would be seen as positive covenants. And we've got C, restriction right there. That's going to tell us that it's a negative, something that can't be done. Restrictions on prior claims. This is also a negative, so we can go to B. A trader takes a short position in 25 futures contracts where the initial margin is 1,000 per contract and the maintenance margin is 800 per contract. If the margin account balance is 19,000 on day 10, the variation margin is closest to. So variation margin is the additional margin we have to put up if we breach this maintenance margin amount. So let's pull in that formula for variation margin. So it's going to be equal to our initial margin, and then we're going to subtract out margin account balance and then multiply by number of contracts. So initial margin is given at 1,000 per contract. Our margin account balance, I'm going to adjust this for number of contracts. So 19,000 divided by our 25 contracts gives us a margin account balance of 760. And now we can see we did breach that maintenance margin of 800. So now we need to put up additional capital to bring that up to an acceptable level. And so we're taking 1,000 minus 760 multiplied by number of contracts means they need to put up an additional $6,000 of margin. Answer C. Which of the following statements regarding futures contracts is least likely accurate? So we've got least likely, meaning two of these are right and one is not. A, futures contracts are all cash settled contracts. I would lean towards this being our answer since there are normally two options for futures contracts. We can have cash settled, but they also have physical delivery futures contracts where if you buy the contract, then you take delivery of the commodity or whatever you bought as the underlying. B, futures contracts always trade on regulated markets. That is accurate. They're going to be on exchanges. And C, the value of a futures contract is always derived from its underlying asset. That's also going to be correct. These are derivatives, meaning they derive their value from the underlying. Answer A. Black Oil Traders is an American oil producing company that regularly sells oil futures to reduce the risk of fluctuating oil prices. This activity can best be described as hedging, clearing, or speculating. This is definitely not speculating. If they were speculating, they would be selling or buying oil futures not to reduce risk, but in order to make some type of profit because they think that oil prices are going to go up or down. Clearing would be if they were acting as an intermediary or an exchange and they were helping facilitate the buying and selling of oil futures. They're clearly not doing that here. So we know that this is A, hedging, and the key here is they are reducing their risk As an oil producer, they can sell futures and lock in the future price that they'll be able to sell their oil at, which is a risk reduction technique. Answer A. Doug Beckham, Apple's derivative manager, purchased a USD 100 call option. So that 100 is our strike price or exercise price for the price of USD 11 in February 2019. If Beckham predicts Apple will be trading at USD 120 in February 2019, the break-even price for the option is closest to. Our break-even is going to be this exercise price of 100, and then we're going to add to that $11 of premium. So this is basically telling us what we need the stock to rise up to in order to break even, and then above that we'd be making profit. So at 120 we would definitely make some profit. So 100 plus 11 gives us USD of 111. Answer B. Which of the following is least likely a category of alternative investments? So least likely, meaning two of these will be considered alternatives and one will not. So we've got collectibles. These are generally considered alternative investments. These could be things like art or sports cards. They're not going to be liquid, traded on exchanges. They're going to be done more behind the scenes or as illiquid assets. B, infrastructure. Their infrastructure is often considered alternative. However, there's public and there's private infrastructure, so I'm going to leave that in place for now. And C, supranational bonds. Considering B and C, I would rule out B, infrastructure, considering that as more of an alternative than supranational bonds. These are going to be more liquid, publicly traded for the most part, whereas infrastructure is going to be more in its own category. Answer C. The sources of commodities' future returns can best be described to be from A, roll yield only, B, roll yield and collateral yield, or C, roll yield, collateral yield, and change in spot prices. Including all these is going to be our best answer. All three of these are going to contribute positively or potentially negatively to the commodity's future return. Answer C. Which of the following is least likely a valuation method for private equity portfolio companies? So least likely meaning two of these will be used predominantly. We've got the cost-based approach, asset-based approach, or the discounted cash flow method. We can rule out discounted cash flow method right away. This is going to be most predominantly used. Private equity companies are very heavily reliant on investing in companies using debt to then use those cash flows to pay down debt. So then between the asset-based approach and cost-based approach, these are going to be less cash flow heavy and more so based on the assets of the company. Asset-based is going to be looking at the balance sheet. Cost-based is going to be looking more at what would it cost to actually replace all these assets on the balance sheet. So they're going to be relatively similar and not as heavily used as discounted cash flow. However, asset-based is going to be more likely to use than cost-based. Asset-based might be used if you're looking at a company that had a lot of assets or was very asset heavy and maybe didn't have a lot of intangibles on the balance sheet where you'd be able to better value those assets. And it might be important to understand the value of those so that you can determine how good of a return the company's making on those assets. Answer A. Quantum Returns is a hedge fund with $250 million as initial investment capital. A 3% management fee based on assets under management is charged at year end, and a 20% incentive fee is charged on performance net of management fees. In the first year of operations, the fund earned a 16% return. The investor's effective return given this fee structure is closest to. So to figure out our effective return, we need to take into account these fees. We will apply this return to the $250 million, subtract out management fees, subtract out incentive fees, then we can understand that return. So our management fee is the most straightforward. It's going to be 3% multiplied by this $250 million. Since we're doing year end, we need to apply this 16% return. So we do 250 times 1.16 times 0.03 gives us 8.7 million in management fees. Our profits then, we're going to take 250 times 1.16, multiply out subtract out the 250, which will give us our overall profits. But since we are net of management fees on the performance fee, we need to also take out the 8.7 million. And that's so you're not double counting or billing on the same AUM or fees twice. So incentive fee then, 31.3 times 0.2 gives us 6.26 in incentive fees. So then from here, our ending AUM is going to be 250 times that return, and then subtracting out both the different types of fees. So we end up with 275.04 ending AUM net of fees. And then we can take our ending value divided by beginning value, subtract out 1, which gives us a net return of 10.02%. Answer B.